They thought I was a senile, harmless retiree. They didn't know a retired accountant never forgets how the numbers work. I am about to show them, in excruciating detail, the cost of greed. They locked up my assets, but they forgot one crucial thing. I am the one who holds the keys to everything. My name is Margaret. I am 68 years old, and for 41 of those years, I was the chief accountant at Apex Manufacturing. I understand balance sheets, I understand ledgers, and I understand that every action has a corresponding and equal reaction. This is a fact, as reliable as the scent of old paper and floor wax at the public library, which is where I had just returned from. My Tuesday shift shelving history books was a small, quiet piece of my week. The house felt still, colder than I'd left it, a silence that had a new, sharp edge. It had been my house for 45 years, David's and mine. Now, it was just a space I occupied, a territory I was slowly, quietly conceding. I went to David's study. It still smelled faintly of him old books and the pipe tobacco he only smoked when he was thinking big. As he'd say, I needed the tax file from 1998. A small, strange audit query had come in from the state, and I, naturally, kept meticulous records. They were in the safe. I pushed aside the heavy landscape painting, a generic, gloomy thing David had inherited, and we'd never bothered to replace. The wall was bare. I stared at the empty space where the old, scuffed metal safe had been recessed into the drywall. It wasn't just bare. The wall itself had been expertly repaired and painted. The new patch of beige, a slightly different, brighter shade than the rest of the room. In its place, bolted directly into the hardwood floorboards that David had so carefully restored by hand, was a cube of high-gloss, black metal. A digital keypad, bright blue and sterile, glowed on its surface. It was an ugly, invasive thing, a tumor of modern security in a room built on history. My hand, thin-skinned and dotted with age spots, reached out. The keypad was cold, smooth glass. I typed in the code. Our anniversary, June 10th, 0610. The keypad beeped twice, a curt, insulting negative. It didn't respond. It didn't even recognize the attempt. It was informing me I did not have the authority to even try. Oh, Margaret. I flinched. I hadn't heard her approach. The carpet in the hallway was new, too, thick and plush, designed for silencing footsteps. Brenda stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame as if she owned it. In her hand was a steaming cup from one of those $5 coffee chains, the logo ostentatiously facing outward. She was wearing new yoga pants, the expensive kind that are never actually used for yoga. Mark and I just upgraded the security, she said, her voice bright and brittle. Much safer. You can't be too careful these days. I turned to face her, my hand still resting on the cold metal. The old safe was fine. It served us for 30 years. Yes. Well. She took a delicate sip, her eyes scanning the room as if calculating its resale value. This one is top of the line, fireproof, waterproof, digitally encrypted. The old one could have been opened with a stethoscope. I kept my voice even, the way I used to when questioning a junior auditor's flawed figures. What is the new code? Brenda. Brenda smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a sharp, practiced expression that was all teeth. She let out a small, patronizing laugh. Oh, don't you worry about that. She pushed herself off the doorframe and took a step into the room. The first time she'd entered the study in months. "It's just for important family business. We're handling everything now. You just rest. Mum, you've earned it." She had called me Margaret when she first walked in. The mom now felt like a second insult, a placating pat on the head to a child, or a dog. Important family business. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I was the one who had balanced the books for this family. I was the one who had structured the trusts, managed the investments, and paid the bills that kept this roof over our heads. I had done the taxes in this very room while David read aloud to me from his history books. And now, I was not part of the family business. I looked at the black safe, a monolith of disrespect. I looked at my daughter-in-law, a stranger who had invaded my home and was now partitioning off my life, piece by piece. She was locking me out, not just from a steel box, but from my own legacy. I stepped back, away from the safe, away from her. The shock was a physical blow, a sudden hollowing in my chest. But underneath it, something else was stirring. It wasn't sadness. It was cold. It was the precise, calculating anger of a woman who has just found a critical error in the final column, and who knows, with absolute certainty, that she is the only one who can fix it. "All right, dear," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "If you say so." She smiled again, satisfied, and turned to leave. I watched her go, and I let the coldness settle in. It felt familiar. It felt like work. That cold, black safe was just the final move in a war I had been losing for a year. A war I hadn't even realized I was fighting. My mind drifted back, past the offensive hum of the new refrigerator downstairs, to the funeral. David's funeral. Just over a year ago. The church was overflowing, the scent of lilies thick and cloying. Mark, my son, was a wreck. He was a tall man, but he seemed to have shrunk, hollowed out by grief. He leaned on me, his shoulders shaking, and I thought my own heart would break for him. And right beside him, a pillar of strength and perfect sorrow, was Brenda. She had been magnificent. She handled the caterers. She fielded the endless, weeping phone calls. She was the image of the devoted, grieving daughter-in-law. I was so lost in the fog of losing David. I mistook her efficiency for compassion. I mistook her control for love. A week after we buried David, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around one of my good china cups. "Mum," she'd said, her voice a soft, velvet glove. "You can't be alone in this huge house. It's too much for you. Mark and I are so worried." She'd reached across and patted my hand. "We'll just move in for a little while, just for a bit, to help you sort things out, to make sure you're okay." A little while. It sounded so temporary, so kind. A little while turned into a month. The suitcases they'd brought for the weekend were unpacked. Then, a moving van arrived. "Just some of our favorite things, Mum, to make it feel cozier for you." The invasion was silent, insidious. It began in the living room. One day, I came down for coffee, and the wall that had held David's life's work, his collection of jazz vinyls, hundreds of records from a lifetime of loving Coltrane and Miles Davis, was empty. The shelves were bare. The records she'd put into storage. It was all so dusty. "Mom," she'd chirped, pointing to the wall. In their place hung a single, enormous canvas of abstract art. 3 angry red slashes on a beige background. It was cold, ugly, and it radiated a kind of sterile arrogance. Then, she came for my garden, my roses. David had built me those raised beds with his own hands, the spring before he got sick. They were my sanctuary. I went out one morning to find a crew of strangers, men I'd never seen, ripping them out by the roots. Brenda stood on the patio, holding a clipboard. "We're redesigning. Margaret," she'd said, the mom mask slipping for a moment. "Going for a modern, low-maintenance aesthetic." By the afternoon, my garden was gone. In its place was 2 tons of grey gravel and a dozen spiky cacti that looked like they'd drawn blood. "It's better," she'd assured me. "Less for you to worry about." And Mark, my son. He was a ghost in his own memories. He'd been an ambitious engineer, a man who loved complex problems, who dreamed of building bridges. Now, he worked a dim, undefined job in acquisitions for a company Brenda's uncle apparently owned. He was always stressed, his jaw always tight. The hum of anxiety about money was a constant, low-grade fever in the house. I tried to talk to him, to find the boy I'd raised inside that worried, 30-something shell. "Mark, the garden," I'd pleaded. "The records." He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "Brenda knows what she's doing. Mum, she's just trying to help. We're updating things. It's just better." My friends stopped coming by. My dearest friend, Susan, had come for our regular Wednesday coffee, only to have Brenda accidentally spill an entire smoothie on the kitchen floor, making the whole visit so chaotic and unpleasant that Susan left, flustered. She never came back. We met at the diner after that, her eyes full of pity I wasn't ready to accept. I was shrinking. I was being updated, piece by piece, like the house. First a gardener, then a hostess, then a music lover. I was becoming invisible in the very space I had curated for 40 years. I was just a senile old woman, a relic to be managed, polished away until nothing was left. The new safe was a declaration of war. Brenda may have thought she was locking me out, but what she had really done was lock herself in with me. You do not spend 41 years balancing the budgets of a multi-million-dollar corporation and simply forget the instincts. You do not just stop being an accountant. My mind, which they had dismissed as old and foggy, was now a finely tuned instrument of investigation. The grief was a fog. This was a crystal-clear ledger. My audit began where all audits do with the paper trail. I started with the mail. For the past 6 months, Brenda had made it a habit to help me by getting the mail. I'd found it patronizing. I now realized it was strategic. But she was sloppy. She assumed I was too senile to check the recycling bin in the utility room. I waited until she and Mark left for one of their mysterious appointments, and I retrieved the consolidated paper bin. I spread the contents on the kitchen table, a mosaic of their recklessness. The numbers didn't lie. They screamed. The utility bills were the first flag. Our electric bill, which had been a predictable $150 a month for a decade, had tripled. The water bill was obscene. They were living in my home as if the basic laws of consumption did not apply to them, as if I were an infinite resource. Then I found the envelopes. Thick, cream-coloured envelopes from credit card companies I had never heard of. Platinum cards. Black cards. Cards with names that implied exclusivity and immense fees. All addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Mark Evans, at my address. They were building a new credit history on the foundation of my home, using my stability as their collateral. I left the trash and went to David's study. I didn't look at the black safe. I didn't need to. The real information was never in the box. It was in the accounts. I sat at David's cherrywood desk, the computer's hum a familiar comfort. I logged into the joint checking account David and I had shared, the one I had, foolishly, kept mark on for emergencies. His definition of an emergency, it seemed, was very different from mine. I scrolled through months of statements. The debits were a cascade of small insults and large hemorrhages. Hundreds of dollars at restaurants I'd never been to. Thousands at high-end clothing stores. And then I saw it. A recurring monthly payment. $2,500 every month. On the 5th. The memo line was stark. Pinnacle Auto Finance. I did a quick search. Pinnacle financed exactly one type of vehicle. The absurdly expensive imported sports car. The kind of car a man in deep financial trouble buys to prove to the world he isn't. The kind of car I had never, not once, seen parked in my own driveway. They were paying for it and hiding it somewhere else. The anger was so cold, it was almost serene. I kept digging. I pulled up the savings account I had opened for Mark when he was born. I'd put in a small amount every month until his 18th birthday. It was his launch fund. He had known about it, but had always, respectfully, left it untouched. It should have held, with interest, around $50,000. I opened the statement. The balance was zero. A single withdrawal, dated 6 months prior. He had emptied it. He had taken the last gift from his childhood and thrown it into the bonfire of Brenda's ambition. That was the betrayal that hurt. But the final discovery, that was the one that turned hurt into something harder. Brenda, for all her cunning, was domestically useless. She never did laundry, just piled it in the small room off the kitchen. I went in, ostensibly to wash a load of towels. Tucked between the washing machine and the wall was a bright purple accordion folder, the kind a teenager would use. I opened it. It wasn't full of coupons. It was a mortgage application, a home equity line of credit. My eyes scanned the pages, my old training taking over. Borrower Mark and Brenda Evans. Collateral 1620 Elm Drive. My home. And there, at the bottom of the signature page, was my name. Margaret Evans. The forgery was decent, but it was flawed. She hadn't gotten the loop on the G right. I had always made my G sharp, angular. Hers was round, lazy. They weren't just spending my money. They weren't just stealing from a savings account. They were actively, methodically, and criminally trying to steal the roof over my head. They were trying to leverage the one solid thing I had left in the world, to fund a lifestyle I didn't approve of, with money I had earned. I closed the folder. I put it back exactly where I had found it. I was no longer a grieving mother. I was an accountant who had just uncovered a profound, systemic fraud. And the next step, after any audit, is to confront the perpetrators. I waited. I sat in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea I didn't taste, listening to the sounds of the house. I heard Brenda on the phone in the entryway, her voice sharp and impatient. I heard her call for Mark. Then the slam of the front door and the aggressive roar of a car engine starting not the sports car, but her expensive SUV. She was gone. To the salon. Or shopping. Her movements were predictable. Mark was in the living room, in David's old leather armchair, staring at a golf tournament on the television. The sound was muted. He was just watching colours move. A man already hollowed out. I retrieved the purple folder from the laundry room. My footsteps, unlike Brenda's, were silent on the floorboards. I had lived in this house for 45 years. I knew its language. I stood in front of him for a full 10 seconds before he noticed me. He looked up, his eyes unfocused, then startled, as if surprised to see me there. "Mum, you okay?" I held up the folder. It was a violent, cheerful purple against the subdued tones of the room. "Mark," I said, my voice as flat and hard as a marble slab. "What is this?" He didn't need to ask what I meant. His eyes locked onto the folder, and the colour drained from his face. The pretense, the thin veneer of the successful son, just evaporated. He didn't try to lie. He didn't try to bluster. He just broke. He put his head in his hands, his elbows on his knees, and his shoulders began to shake. It was a dry, racking sob, the sound of a man who had been holding his breath for months and had finally been punched in the gut. "I lost the job. Mum," he whispered into his palms, the words muffled. "I know," I said. "Speak up." He looked up, his face a ruin. "I lost the job. 6 months ago, the day after your birthday." I remembered my birthday. They had taken me to a ridiculously expensive restaurant, all chrome and tiny portions. Brenda had made a speech about family. It was a lie. All of it. "I didn't know what to do," he said, the words spilling out now. A pathetic, desperate flood. "The debts. Brenda. She likes nice things. The car, the clothes. I was in over my head before the job. After." He gestured around the room, helplessly. "I tried to get another position, but nothing paid enough." Brenda said we had an asset we weren't using. "This house," I stated. It was not a question. "She said you were getting old, that you probably wouldn't even notice. She said it was just a formality, that the house was going to be mine anyway, eventually. We were just borrowing from the future." "My future," I said, "using my house, with my signature." I pulled the single page from the folder, the one with the lazy, rounded G. I held it out. "This signature is a forgery. Mark, a rather poor one. You've been an engineer. You understand precision. This is fraud. What you and your wife have done is a criminal offence, a felony." The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. He recoiled as if I had struck him. "No," he said, standing up, finally showing a spark of life. But it was the life of a cornered animal. "No, Mum, you can't do this. It's just family business." "It stopped being family business when you decided to commit a crime using my name." He was pleading now, his hands outstretched. "Mum, please. You don't understand. You can't call the bank. You can't call the police. You'll ruin us. Brenda, she's pregnant." The air left my lungs. A grandchild. The one thing I had quietly, secretly hoped for, even through all this. A baby. A piece of Mark. A piece of the future. It was a low blow, and it struck me with a physical force. They were using it as a shield. They had kept this, the most profound thing, as a weapon. I looked at my son, who I had taught to ride a bike, who I had held when his first girlfriend broke his heart. I saw him for what he was. Not a victim, Not a man manipulated by a strong woman, just a weak man, a coward, pure and simple. My voice, when I spoke, was colder than I had ever heard it. The pregnancy. Is it real? Mark. He looked confused. What? Of course it's real. She's 8 weeks. We just found out. I see. I put the paper back in the purple folder. Or is that just another formality? He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He didn't understand the question. Or perhaps he did. And he simply had no answer. The silence that filled the room was the worst answer of all. It told me that everything, even a new life, was just another number on their fraudulent balance sheet. I left Mark in the living room, a statue of pathetic excuses. The news of a pregnancy was a calculated blow, aimed straight at the heart of the grandmother they assumed I was desperate to be. It was meant to paralyze me, to make me compliant, to make me think of the family. I felt the walls closing in, the air thick with their betrayal. I was cornered. I walked away from him, my mind a frantic scramble for a countermove, for a single piece of leverage in a game I hadn't known I was playing. And then, as I stood in the silent hallway, David's voice came to me, as clear and dry as it had been in life. Knee-jerk reactions are for amateurs. Maggie, he used to tell me, a lifetime ago, when I'd get flustered over a quarterly report. The real plan B is always in plain sight. People are too busy panicking to look down. My gaze snapped to the study, not to the ugly black box they'd bolted to the floor, but to the wall, David's wall, his books. I walked into the room. The sterile black safe was an insult, a cold, hard piece of their arrogance. But the wall of books was David. It was history, economics, philosophy, and, on the bottom shelf, a row of my own textbooks, which he kept as a half-serious, half-joking shrine to my own pragmatism. My fingers traced the dusty leather spines, a history of the Peloponnesian War, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and there, shoved between a treatise on finance and a biography of Churchill, was the book I had dreaded most in my sophomore year of college. Advanced Accounting Principles 3rd edition. It was a monstrosity of a textbook, bound in dark blue, 1,000 pages of impenetrable theory. It was the most boring, obvious thing in the room. It was in plain sight. My heart was a fist in my chest. I pulled the heavy volume from the shelf. It was too light. The leather cover was real, but as I opened it, I saw the truth. The first 20 pages were intact, a facade of dense text. Behind them, the core of the book had been expertly hollowed out, a perfect, rectangular void. David's plan B, inside, nestled in the paper coffin, was his answer. My answer. There was a small, heavy, brass key on a simple metal ring, stamped with a number 415. There was a tiny, black, plastic rectangle. A device I'd only seen in movies. A micro recorder. So small it fit in the palm of my hand. And underneath it all, an envelope. His thick, cream-coloured business stationery. My name, Maggie, was written on the front in his strong, definitive hand. I picked it up, my hands shaking. I unfolded the single page. My dearest Maggie, the letter began. If you are reading this, I am gone, and you are in a fight you did not start. I know you, I love you, and I know our son. I love Mark. But he is a soft man, Maggie. He seeks comfort, and I am afraid he will always find himself attached to a woman who mistakes hardness for strength. Your kindness is your greatest asset, my love. But in the face of true, bottomless greed. It is your one liability. Do not let them ruin you. Do not let your love for the boy he was blind you to the man he has become. This is not a negotiation. It is a defense. The key is for Fidelity Trust. Downtown. Box 415. The recorder. Well, people are remarkably honest about their intentions when they think no one is listening. Use it. I have protected you. I have always protected you. At the bottom of the hollow, beneath where the letter had been, were 2 more documents. They were not originals, but crisp, notarized copies. The first was a statement for the David M. Evans Irrevocable Trust, an entity I had only vaguely known he'd set up. Upon his death, the sole beneficiary and trustee was listed as Margaret Evans. The balance on the statement made me sit down. David had quietly, systematically, firewalled a significant portion of our life's work, locking it away where no one, not Mark, not any creditor, could ever touch it. The second document was a copy of the deed to the house, the deed to 1620 Elm Drive, dated 2 years ago. He had transferred the house. He had moved it, legally and ironclad, entirely into the name of the irrevocable trust. I let the paper rest on my lap. The forgery in the laundry room, the mortgage application, the entire pathetic scam it was built on nothing. They were trying to get a loan against a house that, in the eyes of the law, was not mine to sign for. It belonged to the trust, and I was the trust. They hadn't just underestimated a grieving widow. They had underestimated a brilliant, meticulous man who had seen this all coming. I was not a victim. I was not a senile old woman. I was a fortress. And David had just handed me the keys. I put the key, the recorder, and David's letter in the pocket of my housecoat. The weight was solid, a ballast against the storm I was about to unleash. I was no longer a grieving victim. I was an auditor, and I had just been given the master ledger. I walked down to the kitchen. I let my feet shuffle. Just a little. I allowed my shoulders to slump, to radiate the weariness they expected of me. They were at the kitchen table, the silence between them thick and toxic. Mark was staring into a cold cup of coffee. Brenda was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving with a sharp, angry flick. I poured myself a glass of water, letting my hand tremble as I lifted the pitcher. "Oh, dear," I said, my voice thin and airy. I sat down heavily, as if the simple act of standing was a trial. Brenda didn't look up. Mark flinched, still terrified from our earlier confrontation. "Mark," I said, my voice a watery quaver. "I've been thinking about what you said. About that paper." I looked at him, forcing a cloud of confusion into my eyes. "The one for the house. I've been sitting in my room, trying so hard, but I simply cannot recall signing it." I gave a small, pathetic laugh. "It's so silly. I must be getting terribly forgetful. My mind just isn't what it used to be." I saw it. The look. It was fast as a viper's tongue. Brenda's thumb stopped moving. Her eyes met Mark's over the table. It was a look of pure, unadulterated confirmation. "She's senile," it said. "It's working. She doesn't even remember." Brenda's entire demeanor shifted. The annoyance vanished, replaced by a thick, cloying concern. "Oh, Mom," she said, putting her phone face down on the table. "Don't you worry your head about that. We told you. It's just a formality. We're handling everything. You don't need to remember a thing." "I know, dear. I know," I said. You're so good. It's just so much paperwork. And my finances? It's all so confusing since David passed. I sighed, the picture of helpless fragility. Then, I played the ace. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out a different envelope. A prop. A simple, white business envelope I had addressed to myself at David's desk. The return address was Fidelity Trust. And then this, I said, pushing it onto the table as if it were a piece of junk mail. I don't even know what this is. I found it in David's desk. Brenda's eyes, sharp and predatory, snapped to the logo. She was on it before Mark could even react, her hand snatching the envelope. Fidelity Trust, she said, her voice sharp. We don't bank there. I don't know, I said, looking away. David handled everything. She tore it open. Inside was a single, fake statement of holdings I had printed from our home computer. I had been vague on the details, but very specific on the final number. A number large enough to make a greedy person stupid. I watched her face. It was a marvel of failed suppression. Her eyes widened, just a fraction. I saw her pupils dilate. I saw the tiny muscle in her jaw jump. This was the jackpot she had been digging for. This was the motherlode. My goodness, she breathed, staring at the paper. What is it, dear? I asked, feigning anxiety. Is it a bill? I hope it's not another bill. No, Mum, she said, her voice suddenly a velvet purr. She looked up at me, her smile a dazzling, terrifying thing. It's not a bill. It's a fund, a trust fund. David left it for you. Oh, I said, as if this were a burden. More money. It looks like a lot. I don't know what to do with it. It's just sitting at that bank. Fidelity Trust. I don't know how to get it. I don't have the codes or the keys. I wouldn't even know where to begin. The trap was set. Now. I just had to wait for the animal to walk into it. Brenda slid the paper back into the envelope and then, to my astonishment, she reached across and patted my hand. Her rings were cold against my skin. You poor, sweet thing, she cooed. You are completely right. You shouldn't have this stress. And that money isn't safe just sitting in some account we don't control. Not at all. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Here is what we'll do, Mum. I'll help you. I will take care of everything. She was so bright, so energized. The shark had scented blood. I'll drive you to the bank myself, she said, her words coming faster now. We'll go together, and we'll sort this all out. We'll transfer all of it. She smiled. We'll move it right here, to the new safe, the one Mark and I installed. Then it's all together, safe and sound, where we can look after it for you. It was almost disappointing. How simple it was. She believed, with all her greedy heart, that she was about to consolidate my entire net worth into a black box of which only she had the key. We'll go first thing, she said, already standing up, too excited to sit. Get there right when they open. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I will pick you up and we will go to Fidelity Trust at 9 a.m. sharp. You just be ready. I'll handle the rest. I looked up at her. This monster, this thief. I gathered all the vulnerability I had left and channeled it into my gaze. Oh, Brenda, I whispered, letting a tear form in the corner of my eye. Thank you. You are so good to me. I just don't know what I would do without you. The drive to the bank was short. It was 8:50 in the morning. Brenda, for the first time in our acquaintance, was not only on time, but early. She was practically vibrating in the driver's seat, her knuckles white on the steering wheel of a car I had never been in before. It was, just as I had suspected, a low-slung, cherry-red sports car. It smelled of new leather and burnt money, my burnt money. The $2,500 a month payment. She had been so consumed by the promise of a bigger score that she'd forgotten to hide the evidence of her smaller ones. She parallel parked the car with an aggressive screech, cutting off a sedan without a glance. "All right, Mum, let's go. Stay close. I'll do all the talking." She linked her arm through mine. It wasn't a gesture of support. It was an act of possession. She was marching me in. Her prize, her golden goose. Fidelity Trust was old world, marble floors, high ceilings, and an atmosphere of quiet, serious wealth. It was not a place for loud, sudden movements. Brenda, in her stilettos and bright red car, was an alien here. A man in a perfectly tailored grey suit approached us before we had taken 2 steps inside. He was older, with a kind, professional face. He looked past Brenda, his eyes landing on me. "Mrs. Evans," he said, his voice a respectful baritone. "We were expecting you. Mr. Peterson. We spoke on the phone yesterday." I had, of course, made a preliminary call, using the private number David had left on his letterhead. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Mr. Peterson?" I said, my voice the perfect blend of aged fragility and politeness. Brenda's arm tightened on mine, her nails digging into my coat. Her smile was a rictus. She stepped forward, physically inserting herself between me and the bank manager. "I'm Brenda Evans," she announced, her voice too loud for the lobby. "I'm her daughter-in-law. I'm here to help my mother manage her accounts. This is all very confusing for her. We're looking to simplify her. Holdings." Mr. Peterson's gaze was impeccable. He did not react to her rudeness. He simply looked over her shoulder, at me. "Is this correct, Mrs. Evans?" I gave the slightest, most pathetic nod I could muster. "Yes. My daughter-in-law is helping me." "Very well," he said, not a trace of judgment in his voice. "This way, please." He led us not to a public desk, but to a heavy mahogany door that closed with a silent, weighted thud. The room was a private office, lined with books. It smelled of wood polish and integrity. We sat. Mr. Peterson took his place behind his large desk. He folded his hands. "Now, Mrs. Evans," he began, his voice calm. "The trust your late husband established, the David M. Evans Trust, is an irrevocable entity with very specific provisions. It is, by its design, exceptionally secure. Access is limited solely to you, the trustee." He paused, looking at his screen. "Or, in the event of your medically documented incapacitation, by the person designated as your durable power of attorney." Brenda leaned forward, placing her designer handbag on the desk with a click. She was done with the pretense. This was the moment of victory. "Exactly," she said, her voice dripping with false efficiency. "That's precisely why I'm here. This is all too much for her. We need to add me as the power of attorney today. We need to get my name on the account so I can manage it properly." Mr. Peterson looked at me. The moment was here. The air in the room was still. I straightened my spine. The shuffling, confused old woman I had been playing for the last 12 hours simply vanished. I looked at Mr. Peterson, my voice clear, cold, and with the full authority of the chief accountant I had been for 41 years. "No," I said. Brenda froze. Her smile, which had been plastered on her face, twitched. "That is not what I am here for," I continued, my words precise. "I am here today to do something else entirely. I am here to activate the full withdrawal clause, Section 4, subsection B, of the trust agreement. I want to liquidate all holdings, cash out the entire principal, and transfer the full balance to a new account at a different bank, effective immediately." Silence. Brenda's face went from smug to confused to a pale, mottled white. The blood had drained from her face, leaving behind 2 spots of rouge on her cheeks. "Mom," she squeaked, the name a small, strangled sound. "Mom, what are you doing? You can't. That's our money." I turned, slowly, to face my daughter-in-law. I let her see the ice in my eyes. I let her see the woman she had dismissed, the woman she had robbed, the woman who had just, with a single sentence, reclaimed her entire life. "This," I said, my voice soft, but carrying across the silent room like a shard of glass, "is part 1. Now, Brenda, we come to part 2. Mr. Peterson," I said, and my voice did not waver. It was the same voice I had used for decades to command boardrooms. "Thank you for proceeding with the trust liquidation. While that is being processed, I require one more service." Brenda was still standing, frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. She looked like a statue in the middle of shattering. "Please place a call to the Bank of America, the Main Street branch." I continued, my gaze locked on the bank manager. "I hold a joint checking account there. The account holders are listed as Margaret Evans and Mark Evans." Brenda finally found her voice, but it was a ragged, desperate shriek. "No, you can't. That's Mark's money. That's our money. We pay our bills from there." I ignored her. I spoke only to Mr. Peterson, as if she were nothing more than a buzzing fly in the room. "I am the primary owner of that account. My son was added years ago as a mere convenience, an arrangement I now deeply regret. I am here to revoke that convenience." You old witch," she hissed. "You don't even know the balance. You'll mess up the car payment." "Ah, yes, the car payment." I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "The $2,500 monthly payment for the red vehicle you parked outside. The account, I believe, is also used for various clothing stores, high-end restaurants, and a number of platinum credit cards I did not authorize. I want it stopped. All of it." I leaned forward, my hands folded calmly on his desk. "I am invoking my right as the primary owner. I want to withdraw the entire balance, drain it to 0, every single cent. I want it transferred and deposited into the new trust account we are establishing today. I am, as the title of this meeting implies, emptying it all." This was the final, devastating blow. This was not some abstract trust fund. This was their daily, operational life. Brenda lost all control. She lunged, not at me, but at the desk, her palms slamming onto the polished wood. "She's senile," she screamed, her face contorted. "You can't listen to her. She's mentally incompetent. I am her family. I am trying to protect her from herself. She is confused. Call a doctor. Stop this." Mr. Peterson did not startle. He did not raise his voice. He had seen this before. Perhaps not this exact scene, but he knew the scent of desperation. He simply, quietly, pressed a small, dark button on the console on his desk. The mahogany door opened instantly, but not with a sound. Two men, both large, both dressed in immaculate dark suits, stepped into the room. They were bank security, but they looked like presidential bodyguards. They stood just inside the door, silent and immovable. Mr. Peterson finally turned his full, unamused attention to Brenda. "Ma'am?" he said, his voice now losing its polite warmth. "Mrs. Evans's legal counsel, Mr. Harrison, contacted us yesterday afternoon. He fully briefed us on Mrs. Evans's wishes and on her complete legal and mental capacity to execute them." He gave a small gesture toward the door. "Mr. Harrison also prepared us for the possibility that you might attempt to interfere, or that you might make accusations regarding your mother-in-law's competence. You are attempting to disrupt a client's legitimate financial transactions. This is a private meeting, and I must ask you to leave. Now." "Leave!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're kicking me out. She is the one robbing us. She's robbing her own son, her future grandchild. Mrs. Evans," Mr. Peterson said, "we have already authorized the wire transfer. The account is empty." Empty. That one word was the kill shot. Brenda's rage collapsed, just for a second, into a black hole of pure, undiluted panic. She looked at me, her eyes wide with the true, terrifying understanding of what I had done. She wasn't just losing a future windfall. She was losing today. Then the rage returned, 1,000 times stronger. "You can't!" she screamed, a raw, primal sound. The two security men moved. They did not touch her, not at first. They simply flanked her, their solid presence a human wall guiding her, forcing her to back away from the desk. "This way, ma'am," one of them said, his voice a low rumble. "I will sue you," she shrieked, pointing a trembling, red-nailed finger at me. "I will sue this whole bank. Mark will hear about this. You will be homeless. You old, stupid." She was still screaming as they escorted her, a whirlwind of impotent fury, out of the office. We all heard the cry of, "You'll regret this," echo down the marble hall before the heavy door closed, cutting off the sound. The thud was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The silence that filled the office was clean. It was the silence of a ledger that has just been balanced to the penny. Mr. Peterson took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and pushed a small stack of papers across the desk. He was, once again, the perfect bank manager. "Well," he said, "now that that is settled, if you'll just sign here, Mrs. Evans, and here. The initial transfer is complete. The trust liquidation will be finalized by noon." I picked up the heavy, gold-plated pen. My hand was as steady as steel. I signed my name, my angular G, sharp, clear, and definitive. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson," I said, sliding the papers back. "You have been exceptionally efficient." I had taken it all back. I did not ride home in the cherry-red sports car. I saw it parked across the street from the bank as I exited, Brenda inside, furiously screaming into her phone, presumably at Mark. I simply raised my hand and hailed a yellow taxi, a luxury I had not allowed myself in months. The ride was quiet and pleasant. I let myself into my house. The silence was profound. The thick, expensive rugs they had installed suddenly felt like an oppressive weight, a shroud on my floors. I walked into the living room, to the beige wall with the angry red slashes. I took the small black recording device from David's book and placed it on the mantelpiece, tucked discreetly behind a porcelain figurine David had bought me in 1982. I pressed the small button to start recording. I then went to the kitchen and began to brew a pot of tea. The real tea. The good loose-leaf Darjeeling, not the cheap bags Brenda bought. I was pouring the boiling water when the front door burst open, slamming against the wall with a crack that split the wood of the doorframe. Brenda stormed in first, her face a terrifying mask of rage and blotchy, running mascara. Mark was right behind her, his face as pale and slack as dough. "What did you do?" Brenda shrieked. It was not a question. It was an accusation torn from her throat. "What did you do?" "I went to buy gas." Declined. "I went to the ATM." Declined. "I tried to get a coffee." Declined. 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 "They said the account is empty." Mark stumbled forward, his hands flapping uselessly at his sides. "Mom," he said, his voice a pathetic whine. "Mom, you didn't. You couldn't have. The bank. They said everything. They said you took everything." He looked at me. This son of mine, his eyes wide with the terror of a child who has just realized he is truly, finally, on his own. "You've ruined us, Mum. You've ruined me." I took a calm sip of my tea. The porcelain was warm in my hands. "No, Mark," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I have not ruined you. I have simply stopped funding you. There is a difference. I have taken back what is mine. The money you and your wife have been stealing. The money you have been living on. The money you used to buy sports cars and to pay for debts you incurred all on your own. It was my money. And now, it is mine again." Brenda let out a sound, somewhere between a sob and a growl. Her eyes darted around the room, frantic, searching for a weapon, for leverage, for anything. And then, her gaze locked on the hallway leading to the study. A new, terrible kind of hope lit her face. "No," she whispered, a slow, venomous smile spreading. "No, you didn't. You stupid old woman, you didn't. Did you? You only got the money." She turned and sprinted, her heels clattering on the hardwood floor, toward the study. Mark and I followed. I, at a much calmer pace. She was on her knees in front of the glossy black safe, her fingers already flying over the keypad. "It doesn't matter," she said, laughing, a high, hysterical sound. "It doesn't matter. The papers, the house papers, the deed. It's all in here. We'll sell this house. We'll sell it from under you and we will leave you in a gutter." She was punching in the code she and Mark had set, the code they had used to lock me out. The keypad beeped. A curt, double negative. She frowned. "What?" She punched it in again, more slowly, her brow furrowed. Beep. Beep. "Mark!" she shrieked. "What's the code? Did you change it?" "No," he said. I don't know. It's not working," she screamed, pounding on the smooth metal door with her fists. "It's not working." I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Oh, dear," I said, my voice mild. "I'm afraid that won't work. I forgot to mention it." They both froze and looked at me. "After you left this morning," I said, "while you were so helpfully driving me to the bank, I made another call. I had a locksmith come by. A very nice, very efficient young man. I had the code changed." Brenda was very still. You changed the code? I did, I said. It's a much better code now, much more secure. It's David's birthday, March 4th, 0304. You never did remember that one, did you? Dear. For a second, there was total silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the computer. Brenda rose to her feet, slowly, her body rigid. The last thread of her sanity, of her calculated, cruel control, had snapped. When she turned, her eyes were not human. They were flat, black, and murderous. You miserable, old bitch, she spat, and then she lunged at me. She flew across the room, her hands out, her red-nailed fingers curled into claws aimed directly at my face. It was Mark who reacted. It was the one, single, decent thing he had done in a year. He shouted, "Brenda, no!" and grabbed her around the waist, his own momentum tackling her to the side just as she reached me. They crashed into the wall, Mark shouting, Brenda screaming and clawing, not at me, but at him, at anything. A rabid animal. The battle, it seemed, was finally, truly, out in the open. Mark was stronger than I gave him credit for, but Brenda was fueled by a primal, cornered animal rage. She thrashed in his grip, her nails raking his arms, her voice a shredded howl. "Let me go. I will kill her. I will kill her. Mark, you let her do this. You weak, pathetic." In the middle of her scream, a sound, clean and sharp, cut through the house. Ding-dong. The civilized chime of the front doorbell. It was as if a switch had been thrown. Brenda froze, her mouth open, panting. Mark, breathing heavily, loosened his grip, his eyes wide and panicked. The sound of the outside world, of order and consequences, had finally arrived. I, on the other hand, had been waiting for it. I calmly stepped back from the study doorway, my teacup still steady in my hand, and walked to the front door. I opened it. On my porch stood 2 uniformed police officers. Beside them, looking as calm as if he were arriving for a dinner party, was Mr. Harrison, the lawyer from the trust, his leather briefcase in hand. He peered past me, taking in the scene, the dishevelled study, the heaving, furious woman, the cowering man. "Good evening, Margaret," Mr. Harrison said, his voice the epitome of calm. "Things seem tangled." Brenda and Mark were statues of guilt. "Mr. Harrison, officers, please come in," I said, stepping aside. The officers entered, and their solid blue presence seemed to shrink the entryway. They were all business. I turned and gestured toward the couple. "Officers, I am formally reporting 2 intruders in my home. For the past year, they have been committing systematic financial fraud against me. In the last 48 hours, I uncovered an attempt to fraudulently secure a mortgage on this property. And just now, I looked directly at Brenda. This woman, Brenda Evans, physically attacked me." Brenda's paralysis broke. "No, that's a lie. This is our house. She's our mother. She's senile. She's crazy. She doesn't know what she's saying." Mr. Harrison stepped forward, his voice cutting through her hysteria. "Officers," he said, opening his briefcase, "if I may." He produced a thick, bound document. "This is the deed and the controlling trust agreement for this property, 1620 Elm Drive. It is, and has been for 2 years, the sole property of the David M. Evans Irrevocable Trust." He handed the document to the senior officer, Mrs. Margaret Evans is the sole trustee and beneficiary. These individuals, he gestured to Mark and Brenda, have no legal standing in this home whatsoever. They are, as Mrs. Evans correctly stated, trespassing. The officer read the document. His face was grim. He looked up at me. Ma'am, the assault and the fraud. That's a strong claim. It is, I said. I walked into the living room, retrieved the small black recorder from the mantelpiece, and clicked the stop button. I held it out to him. But I have found that people are remarkably honest about their intentions when they believe no one is listening. You will find, on this recording, a full confession of the fraud, their acknowledgement of the forgery, and their entire plan to steal this house. It concludes with the assault you just interrupted. The officer took the recorder. He looked at the lawyer's documents. He looked at my calm face. And then he looked at the two wreckages of human beings by the study. He didn't need to listen to the tape. It was all there. He looked at Mark and Brenda, his patience gone. I've heard enough. You two. You have 10 minutes, 10, to gather your personal essentials, a toothbrush, a wallet, one change of clothes. You will then vacate the property. If you are not on the sidewalk in 10 minutes, I will be placing you both under arrest. One for criminal trespass. He nodded at Mark. And you, ma'am? He stared at Brenda. For criminal trespass and felony assault. Mark just slumped. A man made of straw. But Brenda, she had one card left. You can't, she shrieked. I'm pregnant. This is his grandchild. You can't throw a pregnant woman out. The officer looked at her, then at me. I said nothing. I just held my tea. I met his gaze. The pregnancy, real or not, was just another line item on their ledger of lies. My cold silence was all the answer he needed. He shook his head. That's a family matter. This is a legal one. 9 minutes. I did not watch them pack. I did not watch them scramble, or whisper, or cry. I went to the kitchen and refreshed my tea. I heard them. A flurry of panicked movement, drawers opening, a zipper being pulled. I heard the muffled sound of Mark sobbing. I walked back to my open front door. I stood on the threshold. A cool evening breeze finally cleaning the air in my home. They came out, escorted by the officers. Mark was carrying a single gym bag, his face buried in his hands. Brenda was carrying nothing but her own rage, her face a mask of such profound hatred it was almost unrecognizable. They were ushered down my front walk, onto the public sidewalk, out of my house, out of my life. I stood there, in the doorway, and I took a long, slow sip of my tea. I watched them get into the little red sports car, a car I would not be making the next payment on. I watched them drive away, their lives, their lies, finally, completely, and utterly emptied. I did not look back. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd genuinely love to know where you're all tuning in from. So drop that in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more people find this story.